Chapter 1. Lance Cooper was cruising 7,000 feet above the earth when the EMP hit. He and his best friend, Paul Campbell, were flying over the woods near Lance's homestead in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains after receiving unconfirmed reports of a rapidly spreading forest fire in the area. Paul had been reluctant to fly his Cessna at night, but it had been an unusual and dangerously dry summer, and there had barely been any rainfall up to this point either. To have confirmed the reports in Lance's truck would have taken them 3 hours on bumpy dirt roads, compared to a mere 15 minutes of smooth flying in the Cessna. And if the fire were indeed vicious and rapidly spreading, the time they saved could mean the difference between life and death. There was not only this, of course. A forest fire that got out of control could destroy everything Lance had worked so hard to build over the last decade, which in turn would obliterate any chance of survival he and his family would have in the event of any sort of major catastrophe, just like the one that killed the engines of the plane the two men were flying. Paul, a shortish, stocky fellow with a balding head of close-cropped blonde hair and dense brown beard, was the joker of the pair, a goofy and cheerful counterpart to Lance's taciturn and analytical, but quietly warm, presence. Lance was tall, lanky and lean, with shaggy black hair and intense, almost piercing brown eyes, and strong masculine facial features, with a broad, square jaw dusted with graying stubble. The two of them had been best friends since grade school, and now, almost 30 years after those carefree days, both men had invested 10 years of their time and most of their money into the construction and establishment of an off-grid, self-sustaining homestead, far from civilization. Paul usually had a smile or joke ready for any situation, but he had nothing for this one, except a quietly muttered, "Oh shit," when the droning roar of the plane abruptly silenced and all the dash lights went out. "What just happened?" Lance asked, alarmed at how loud his voice suddenly sounded in the formerly noisy cockpit, which had plunged into nearly complete darkness and was now only lit by the eerie, silvery blue glow of the full moon. "I don't know, bud, but it's bad. Really bad," Paul muttered. "I've had an engine fail on me before, but it's never happened like this. Absolutely nothing is working." An idea about what had just happened suddenly popped into Lance's mind, and the implications of what it would mean if his theory were correct had him reeling with even more fear than the current situation. He scrambled to get his phone out of his pocket, and his heart started boosting surges of fear-chilled blood through his veins when he saw it was dead. "Get out your phone," he said to Paul. "Lance, we can't call for help on a phone. Shit, the radio's even dead," Paul gasped, his voice hoarse with rising panic. "It's not about that. Just get it out," Lance insisted. Paul, whose mind was racing madly, hastily whipped out his cell. "It's dead, man," he said, tossing it away, his mind on the fact that they were going to have to crash land. "I told you it was useless." Lance was now positive that he knew precisely why everything in the plane had died. However, that knowledge would do little to get him and Paul out of their current predicament. And all this crushing realization really accomplished was to make Lance's head spin with an even greater sense of debilitation. "We're losing altitude fast," Paul yelled from the pilot's seat. "I'm going to try to glide in for a landing on the river. It's our only chance." "Can we make it from here?" Lance asked, finally feeling a sense of calm detachment wash over him. In situations of tremendous pressure, while he would often experience initial feelings of fear and panic, he was always ultimately able to keep his head. "Aren't there parachutes in the back of the plane?" "We'll be too low by the time we get the chutes on to jump," Paul said grimly. "Landing on the river is our only shot." "We'll make it," Lance said calmly. In the distance, he saw the river gleaming like a ribbon of mercury cutting through the darkness of the forest, moonlight glittering on its surface. Paul, sweating, his fingers grasping the controls with a white-knuckled grip, finally found it in him to make light of their deadly situation. "Hey, at least we found out there's no forest fire, right?" he said, his teeth bright in the gloom of the cockpit, as he flashed Lance a quick grin. "If we die right now, we can at least die with smiles on our faces, knowing that the homestead's gonna be okay." "And there's no man I'd rather die next to, buddy," Lance said, coolly watching the ground and the treetops rushing toward them at a furious speed. "We survived the war in Iraq together, and we're gonna survive this. I can see the river clearly now. We're gonna make it." The plane was dropping rapidly. While Paul, who had been flying for decades, had experienced an engine failure and a glide-in landing once before, Lance had never been a part of such a thing. The silence, aside from the sound of rushing air, inside the plane was eerie, and the dense darkness compounded its strange menace. Lance closed his eyes as they hurtled toward the broad, moonlit river and the black mass of trees, one representing life and the other certain death. In his mind, in what could be the last few moments of his life, he pulled thoughts and images of his family into his head, his beautiful wife Jane, and his sons Kevin and Alan. If these were the last moments of his life, he regretted not being able to say a proper goodbye to the people he loved so much. But other than that, he had no regrets about his life. He knew that Jane, Kevin, and Alan would be able to carry on without him, even in the unimaginable chaos that was no doubt already unfolding in the wake of the EMP attack. He had educated and trained them well, and all of them knew what to do and where to go in this sort of situation. Shit. Here we go, Paul growled through gritted teeth. Lance opened his eyes. The treetops were so close it looked as if they would begin to brush the underside of the plane any second, and the smooth, glimmering water of the river looked so far away, too far away. The forest was rushing toward them at a horrifying speed, and when the flimsy body of the plane hit the trees, Lance realized that maybe his initial hope had been wrong, and that perhaps this was indeed the end. The river simply looked too far away to reach at the speed and height at which they were gliding. He closed his eyes, whispered a prayer, and braced for impact. Chapter 2. "That's one badass lightsaber, man," Bernard said to his friend, Kevin, who was wielding the replica weapon with the fluid speed and effortless skill of a fencing master. His moves were not merely pulled out of thin air or half-baked attempts to replicate what he had seen on movie screens. One of Kevin's many hobbies was historical fencing, and he could hold his own in a duel with longswords. Kevin performed one final flourish with the lightsaber and then took a mock bow, grinning at Bernard. While Bernard was chubby and stockily built, Kevin was tall and slim and moved with the effortless grace of a cat. Both boys had recently turned 16, but of the two, Kevin looked older. His features were already taking on the hardness of those of a grown man, while Bernard retained the chubby cheeks and soft face of a boy. Kevin had his father's strong jaw, shaggy black hair, and intense brown eyes, while Bernard's auburn hair was close-cropped, and his eyes were green. "I got it off a website where this dude handcrafts them," Kevin said, twirling the lightsaber in his hands. "He's one of the biggest Star Wars geeks around. This is an exact replica of the lightsaber Darth Vader used in Empire Strikes Back." "It's totally sick, bro," Bernard remarked, staring with unabashed awe at the lightsaber. "Kev, you're totally gonna take the prize for best dressed at the Halloween party. I thought my Joker costume looked pretty awesome, but after seeing your Darth Vader rig, I'm pretty sure I don't stand a chance." "You know how long I've been working on it, dude," Kevin said, grinning with pride. "And now I finally get to bust it out. I think I know someone else who'll be impressed," Bernard said, flashing his friend a knowing wink and a grin. Gina, his hopeless crush, to whom he had yet to say a word, would be at the Halloween party both boys were about to attend. Yeah, I guess, Kevin mumbled, as a blush spread across his pale cheeks. Before any of them could say anything else, Kevin's phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out and saw it was a message from his mother. Have fun tonight, sweetie, and give me a call if you want me to pick you up before 11 for any reason. See you later, XX. Who's that? Bernard asked. Kevin rolled his eyes in typical teenage fashion. Just my mom, he said with a sigh. Asking about picking me up from the party and stuff. Don't worry about it. Let's get our costumes on and get our asses over there. The party's already started. An hour later, Bernard's mother dropped off the boys at their school, where the big Halloween party was happening. The rumble of deep bass rippled through the chilly evening air, and plastic jack-o'-lanterns were strung between the lampposts that lined the main pathways. Here and there, large jack-o'-lanterns carved from actual pumpkins leered from the darkness with candlelight blazing from their spooky faces. Outside the main hall, about 100 teenagers in various Halloween costumes milled around in groups, talking and laughing. Most had made half-hearted efforts at putting outfits together, but a few had gone all out and looked quite spectacular. Bernard's Joker costume was impressive enough, but when Kevin, decked out as Darth Vader, walked over to the crowd, most people stopped talking and stared at him in awe. Gina, dressed as Harley Quinn, was one of those who were impressed. She did not immediately recognize Kevin because of the helmet, but she did recognize Bernard quite quickly and figured out who was in the Darth Vader suit. She nudged her friend, Chelsea, in the ribs, who was dressed as a vampire. "Oh my God, that's Kevin Cooper dressed as Darth Vader," she whispered excitedly. "He looks so hot." Unbeknownst to Kevin, Gina had just as much of a crush on him as he did on her. Chelsea, however, was staring at her phone with her face scrunched into an expression of consternation. "This is crazy," she murmured, talking half to herself and half to Gina. "A tropical storm now, at the end of October?" "What did you say?" Gina asked, only expressing a vague interest in her friend's words, and still staring at Kevin as he strolled through the throng of revelers in his superbly constructed Darth Vader outfit. "I just read on the news that the weather forecasters have issued a storm warning," Chelsea answered. "There's a big tropical storm brewing." "Say what? A tropical storm?" Gina asked, finally tearing her eyes away from Kevin. While Chelsea started to tell Gina about the storm, Bernard grabbed Kevin's arm and pulled him in the girl's direction. "What are you doing, man?" Kevin asked, trying to yank his arm out of Bernard's grasp. "Making you go over to say hi to Gina, bro," Bernard said, grinning. "Didn't you see how she was checking you out when you walked in? Come on, dude. All you gotta do is say hello. I'm not gonna sit back and watch you waste the best chance you've got with her. Not tonight, man. Come on. You're doing this. I don't care what you say." Kevin laughed and allowed Bernard to lead him over to Gina and Chelsea. "Evening, ladies," Bernard said with a smooth smile. He and Chelsea were friends, so he moved in with the easy confidence of someone already familiar with the girls. "Hey, Bernard," Chelsea said. "That's Kevin in the Darth Vader suit, right?" "It's me, yeah," Kevin said, thankful for the mask, which was hiding the hot blush that glowed on his cheeks as he stared at Gina. "Hey, Gina, I know we haven't really, met, but your Harley Quinn costume is, it's really dope." He tucked his hands behind his back so that she wouldn't see how badly they were trembling, and silently cursed himself for tripping so clumsily over his words. "Thanks, Kevin," she said, flashing him a dazzling smile. She was a beautiful girl, and the sight of her in her rather revealing outfit made Kevin weak at the knees. He was momentarily struck dumb, not entirely sure what to do or say next. Thankfully, Chelsea quickly filled in the sudden gap in the conversation. "Have you guys heard about the storm?" she asked. "It's just a small tropical storm, isn't it?" Bernard said. "They haven't even given it a name." "That was this morning," Chelsea said. "Now they're saying it's going to be a pretty strong one." "Damn, are you serious?" Kevin said. "A tropical storm now? It's almost November. It's rare, but not impossible, Gina said. My dad's a meteorologist. He knows about this kind of stuff. When's it supposed to hit? Bernard asked. Last I saw on Twitter, people were saying 3 days from now. Chelsea looked up from her phone with a worried expression on her face. This report is saying it could make landfall in 2 days, maybe sooner. Damn, Kevin murmured. There go my plans for the weekend. 2 days? Bernard said, smiling. Who cares? It's not hitting us this second, so forget about it for now. Put your phones away and let's go inside and dance. Whoa! Someone near them gasped when in an instant, everything plunged into darkness, and the rumbling, rhythmic thump of the bass vanished into thin air. What just happened? Gina asked. Kevin could only see her silhouette in the gloom, and he could barely make out the whites of her eyes and teeth. The only illumination in the area now came from the jack-o'-lanterns, inside which the candles continued to glow gently. Power cut, I guess, Bernard said, sounding disappointed. What a freaking time for it, huh? I've been looking forward to tonight for months, and now this happens? Come on. What's going on with my iPhone? Chelsea murmured. The battery was like 80% when I looked at it a second ago, and now it's dead. You gotta be kidding me. Hey, my phone's dead too, Gina remarked, sounding puzzled. I swear mine was at full battery just a few minutes ago. While the others were talking, a rush of cold, almost paralyzing terror hit Kevin. He pulled off his Darth Vader helmet and stared around him, turning in a slow circle to take in the full 360-degree view of everything. There was not a single point of light anywhere. All of the other students had pulled out their phones, but not one of these devices worked. In his hand, his prized lightsaber had gone dark too. With softly trembling fingers, Kevin pulled out his cell, just to confirm his suspicions. He hoped that against all odds it would turn on. But of course it didn't. It wouldn't ever turn on again. He knew and understood this with chilling clarity. For he now knew exactly what had just happened. It was something his father had been predicting would happen for some time. Guys, he murmured. This really is ridiculous, Bernard muttered. Chelsea, isn't your dad like a manager at the power company? You need to chew him out for this, seriously. Guys, Kevin said again, more forcefully. Still, however, it seemed that nobody had heard him. I can't believe this, Chelsea said. Seriously? And my dad said that just last month they upgraded a bunch of transformers and stuff. I mean, if I can find someone with a working phone, I could give my dad a call and find out what's up and stuff, but... Guys, Kevin yelled. That got their attention, and they all turned to peer at him through the darkness. I'm sorry for screaming, he said, but you all need to listen to me very carefully. What's going on, man? Bernard asked. This isn't a power outage, Kevin said, scarcely able to believe the words he was uttering. In fact, this is something that hasn't ever happened in history, but you need to believe me when I tell you that it's serious, real serious. We have to get out of here now because our lives are about to be in danger. Chapter 3. Jane was about to drive out of her parking space when her phone's message tone sounded. Thinking that it had to be Kevin replying to the message she had sent earlier about picking him up from the Halloween party at 11 o'clock, she took out her cell, leaving her car idling in the shopping mall parking lot. However, when she glanced at her device, she was surprised to see that the message on the screen was not Kevin's. Instead, the text came from an unknown number. Come on, Mom, Alan, her younger son, said from the back seat. I want to go home. You already spent 2 hours at the mall. Let's not waste any more time here, please. The home Alan was referring to was not the place he truly considered home. Their self-sustaining, off-grid homestead in the countryside, but rather the city apartment the family lived in during the week, except for Lance, who spent more time at the homestead than in the apartment. It was a Friday evening, and usually the family would have already been out of the city and in the countryside at this point. But because of Halloween, Jane and the boys had decided to stay in town this weekend. "Hold on, Alan, I need to quickly check this message," Jane said. Alan rolled his eyes and sighed. He hated shopping malls and traffic. Indeed, he couldn't stand most things about the city and urban living. He was very much like his father in that way. Even at the tender age of 11, he felt like a jaded urbanite who could think of nothing better than simply getting away from the hustle and bustle. He lived for the weekends when he could get back to the homestead and tend to his precious plants. Alan had been born with a green thumb, Lance always said, and could grow just about anything. Jane also preferred living out in the calm serenity of the countryside. But she and Lance had both agreed that for the sake of getting their boys the best education possible, they would keep an apartment in the city so their sons could go to one of the best schools in the state. Once both of the boys had finished their education, though, she and Lance planned to sell the apartment and retire to the homestead permanently. When she opened the text message from the unknown number, the content was cryptic, but also worrying. The message stated her home address, both the apartment and the homestead, and her car's license plate number. She wondered if it was from some sort of government agency. "Come on, Mom. Quit playing on your phone. Let's get out of here," Alan muttered from the passenger seat. "Give me a second," she said, frowning as she stared at the strange message. She brushed a lock of her long auburn hair from her eyes, hair that was the same color as Alan's. While she and her younger son shared the same eye color and hair color, green and auburn respectively. Alan had already outstripped her in height and looked as if he would be tall and lanky like his older brother and father. She was about to slip the phone back into her bag when another message came through, originating from the same unknown number. This one was a lot more sinister. It stated Alan and Kevin's full names and the address of their respective schools. "Mom, please, we're just sitting in this parking lot wasting time," Alan whined. "Alan, that's enough for now," Jane said firmly. "I've got something important to take care of here." She tapped the phone screen, bringing up the option to call the number, sending her these messages. But before she could hit the dial button, one more text came through from the number. This one addressed her directly. "It's been 12 long years, Buddha, but now I'm free, and now you're going to pay." Jane's blood ran cold as she realized who it was sending these messages. And the implications of this realization hit her like a speeding 18-wheeler. "Oh my God," she murmured, almost dropping the cell from her suddenly trembling fingers. "Mom, what's wrong?" Alan asked, his tone switching rapidly from annoyed to concerned. He had always been a very perceptive and empathetic child. Jane didn't even know how to begin to explain to her son what had just happened, or how to describe the kind of terrible danger he and his brother were in now. Her mind was reeling, and her heart was hammering madly in her ribcage, sending boosts of fear-chilled blood racing through her veins. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Complete indecision racked her. She closed her eyes, breathed in deeply, and held the breath in her lungs for a few seconds. Then she repeated this procedure, breathing in, holding it in, and then exhaling in slow, even rhythm until a sense of calm washed over her. She glanced across at Alan, flashed him a reassuring smile, and hoped that he couldn't see through the fakeness of it. "Sweetie, I forgot to get something important in the mall," she said, choking on the white lie. "I'm just going to run in and grab it, okay? I'll be back in 2 minutes, I promise." "Oh, Mom," Alan whined. 2 minutes," she said, interrupting him as she climbed out of the car. "I'll be back in a sec, you just wait here." She shut the door before he could voice any more complaints. Then glancing over her shoulder and scanning the parking lot for any signs of danger, She strode briskly through the cars, keeping one hand tucked subtly inside her purse, with her fingers curled around the grip of the 9mm pistol she always kept in it. With her other hand, she dialed Lance. She pressed the phone to her ear, impatiently waiting as it rang, but he didn't pick up, and it eventually went to voicemail. She figured he was probably busy with something at the homestead. She left a short, urgent voice message for him. "Lance, we've got trouble. El Diablo is out of prison, and, he wants revenge. He knows where we live, and he knows where Kevin and Alan go to school. I'm not sure what to do. I'm gonna call Lieutenant Jameson right now. Just, call me back when you get this, okay? And be extra vigilant." She hoped that Lance would get the message soon. She didn't think he would be in a great deal of danger, being out in the countryside, but he needed to know what was going on regardless. Next, she scrolled hastily through her contacts to find the name of a man she hadn't spoken to in years. The last time she and Lieutenant Jameson had talked was before she had switched careers, ditching her job as a successful district attorney for something a lot safer and low stress: yoga instructor. When Police Lieutenant Eric Jameson answered her call, he recognized her voice right away, even though it had been years since they had last spoken. "Jane Cooper, how the hell are you? Man, it's been a while, a very long while." "I'm not calling to catch up with you, Eric," she said. "I'm gonna cut straight to the chase. Why didn't anyone tell me El Diablo was getting released early?" "Oh, yeah, that," Jameson muttered, sounding a little guilty. "Well, yeah, I heard he was out of prison, but he's all the way down in Miami, and the prison officials were pretty convinced that he was reformed and stuff. I didn't think it was worth bothering you over." "Reformed my ass," Jane said. "He just sent me a message saying he's gonna make me pay, and he knows my home addresses and my kids' schools." "Oh," Jameson murmured. That's not good." No, it isn't, Eric," she said. "El Diablo was supposed to be serving 2 life sentences. When I put him in prison, I thought that would be the end of it. He murdered 3 people in cold blood, was caught with $1 million worth of crystal meth, and he should never have seen the outside of a prison cell for the rest of his life. Now he's out, and he wants revenge. You need to sort this out, Eric, now." "Are you sure it's him?" "Yes, I'm sure it's him. He specifically called me puta in the message he sent. And that was what he called me throughout the trial. And when I convinced the judge to lock him up for life, he swore that he'd take his revenge on my family and me one day. That was the last straw. That was what made me quit and change careers." Okay, you're right. It's my bad," he said. "I should have told you. Look, where are you? I can send a unit to you right now and make sure you're safe until you get home. And, I'll put out an APB on El Diablo. If we can prove he sent you those texts, we can throw him right back in the slammer, and then you won't have to do any more worrying. But yeah, tell me exactly where you are right." At that moment, the call cut off. However, Lieutenant Jameson's voice wasn't the only thing that died. The entire mall and everything around it plunged instantly into darkness. Jane gasped with shock and looked at her phone, which was completely dead. Aside from the buzz and murmur of many surprised voices, everything was silent. The sort of silence Jane was only accustomed to hearing out in the wilderness around the homestead. It was no power cut. She knew that right away. It was something far more serious, and she was quite sure she knew exactly what it was. And the thought of what this incident meant hit her with an even more potent force than learning that a psychotic murderer and drug dealer was out of prison and looking for revenge against her and her family. Now, in addition to the terrible danger posed by El Diablo, she had to contend with the fact that civilization itself could just have come to what could be its complete end. For she was sure that someone had just detonated an EMP. Jane ran through the dark parking lot, which had taken on an eerie atmosphere, illuminated solely now by moonlight, and hurried over to her car. She opened the door, and Alan greeted her with an expression of both surprise and consternation. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. "My phone just died. All the lights are out. The car's dead." "It's an EMP, Alan," she said. She wasn't about to mention the man known as El Diablo just yet. Alan was bound to be scared enough by the EMP, and she didn't want to make him even more worried by mentioning that a vicious killer may well be hunting them too. "Come on, get your things and let's go. We've got to get straight home, and it's a long walk from here." "An EMP? Are you sure, Mom?" Alan knew exactly what implications this would have, and the thought of it got his young head spinning. "I'm pretty sure. Come on, let's go." Okay," he said, scrambling out of the car and slinging his backpack over his shoulders. Jane and Alan strode briskly through the parking lot, setting out on what would be a long and no doubt perilous journey. She held a hand inside her handbag, keeping her fingers curled around the grip of her pistol. She prayed that she wouldn't have to use it, but could almost feel the gaze of unfriendly eyes watching her from the pitch-black shadows, and knew that among all the dressed-up monsters walking the streets on Halloween night, a real-life demon was now hunting her and her family. Chapter 4. Time seemed to slow down as the Cessna started brushing the treetops in its rapid, gliding descent. Soon enough, Lance realized, the aircraft would no longer merely be brushing the wispy tops of the trees. It would be smashing into the much thicker and stronger portions of their trunks. And when that happened, no. He realized that the force of will and desire alone could not carry them higher or stretch their glide out longer. But he refused simply to accept his approaching demise with passive servility. "Come on," he suddenly roared, while next to him, Paul pulled with all his might on the controls, groaning and gasping as he tried to keep the airplane from dipping any lower. They were tearing through the treetops at an incredible speed, like an out-of-control car that had veered off the freeway and was plunging through a field of tall wheat. The tops of firs and pines were whacking and slamming against the wings and underbelly of the plane as they hurtled over the top of the forest, descending rapidly. Lance couldn't see the silvery highway that was the river any longer. All he could see was the clear, starry sky, and like a field of menacing weeds they were mowing through, the tops of the trees flying by. Then, just as it seemed as if they were about to drop lower and smash headlong into the deadly thickets of the tree trunks, the river appeared before them, its surface glimmering with reflected moonlight, and they burst through the final set of treetops before gliding out over the water. Lance whooped out a cheer of triumph, even though they weren't safe yet, and beside him, Paul grinned and laughed maniacally. "Hold on, man, brace yourself. I'm going to try to bring her in," Paul said, aiming for a broad bend in the river, where the water was calm and the current weak. They came gliding in at a steady speed, and now, without the tree's threat, Paul was able to control the glide a lot more. Even so, a glide-in landing would be both tricky and dangerous. The plane came hurtling in and hit the water with a tremendous splash that would have hurled both men through the windscreen had they not been strapped in their seats. The plane bounced on the water, careered through the air, then hit the surface again, this time with less force. Plowing through the river and throwing up great sprays as it skidded across the water, the plane decelerated rapidly before skidding up into the riverbank, where it came to a stop. For a few seconds, both men sat in stunned silence, scarcely able to believe they had just survived the crash landing. Eventually, Lance spoke. "You did it, buddy. You landed." "I know, I can hardly believe it," Paul murmured, his hand still wrapped around the controls in a white-knuckled grip. "Are you okay, man? You're not injured or anything?" Lance checked himself over. It was difficult to see anything in the dark cockpit, but aside from some bumps and bruises and a sore neck, he didn't feel as if he'd hurt himself. I'm pretty sure I'm okay. You? Paul checked himself and nodded. Yeah, I think I'm okay too. Come on, let's get out of here. Lance grabbed a few things from the plane before getting out. Signal flares, a fire extinguisher, some food and water, and an emergency first aid kit, and then climbed out of the aircraft onto the muddy bank. Paul grabbed a few things too, then joined Lance on the bank. Man, this is crazy, Paul said, shaking his head. I feel like what happened was just like a dream or something that I'm waking up from. I know, it feels pretty surreal, Lance said. I can't believe we're both alive and breathing after that. Their wonder and amazement at still being alive didn't last long, though. There were far bigger things to be concerned with. What do we do now? Paul asked. I mean, if it really was an EMP that knocked my plane out of the sky. It was, Lance said. I'm certain of it. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the end of the world as we know it, isn't it? Paul asked, his usual jovial manner gone and replaced by grave severity. It's not the end of the world, but it certainly is the end of civilization in the way we understand it, Lance said grimly. But let's not stand around here philosophizing about what the EMP means for America and the lives of 99% of our fellow countrymen. We're ready for this, and we have been for years. This is why we poured our hearts and souls into the homestead. Paul nodded. I know, it's just, I sort of thought it would happen one day, just not today. Even though we're prepared for this, it's difficult accepting that it actually happened. It's going to be quite the psychological conundrum to wrap our heads around what's happened, Lance said. But all I care about now is getting my wife and sons out of the city and back to the homestead. Damn it, I wish this had happened any other time. Any other weekend and they'd be safe back at the homestead. But now they're stuck 50 miles away in the city. I know, Paul said. Let's get moving. It's about 2 miles back home from here. Shoot up a flare, it'll give us some light to jog through the woods by. Lance was reluctant to waste valuable flares, but he realized that in this situation, where speed was necessary, he would have to do it. He aimed the gun directly overhead and fired a flare into the sky. The projectile arced up into the air, trailing smoke, and lit up the night in the woods with an eerie red glow. Let's go, Lance said, sprinting off into the nightmarish-looking forest. Paul ran after him with fear and worry trickling through his veins, wondering what sort of mayhem and chaos lay ahead of them on the darkest Halloween night in centuries. Chapter 5. The 3 teenagers stood in slack-jawed disbelief, scarcely able to comprehend or process what Kevin had just explained to them. You mean no electronic technology will ever work again? Gina eventually asked. Like, never ever? Never. Not unless it's rebuilt from scratch, Kevin answered. And even if you did theoretically fix an item, then there's the problem of what you're going to power it with. The whole power grid is gone, and it could take years to get it working again. Oh my God, Gina murmured. This can't be happening. This can't be real, Chelsea gasped. She felt as if she was on the verge of having a full-blown panic attack. My phone, my games, my computer, my iPad, Bernard murmured, his hands shaking. Like all of the other kids his age, he had grown up glued to the screens of electronic devices. For him, imagining a world in which these things no longer existed was almost beyond comprehension. He felt as if the universe were crashing down around him. Kevin was taking the whole thing better than his peers, since he was used to going without technology for long periods. When he and his brother were at the homestead, their parents forbade them to use their devices for longer than half an hour a day. Even so, he was a screen junkie, and while in the city apartment, his face would more often than not be glued to his phone or tablet screen, unlike his younger brother Alan, who was a fan of the outdoors and didn't care very much for phones or video games. Kevin wasn't panicking like the rest of them. But he wasn't exactly okay with the current situation either. The severity of what it meant had yet to hit him fully, but he was already feeling a storm of unease brewing within him. "With this whole EMP thing," Gina said nervously, "what's going to happen when the tropical storm hits? We'll all be without vehicles, without power." "I don't know, but I don't think it'll be good. Even though it's just a tropical storm and not a hurricane, it could do a lot of damage and cause flooding." "So what do we do now?" Chelsea asked. I don't know," Kevin said. He really had no idea what the others could do at this point. He knew that he had to get back to his apartment to wait for the rest of his family. That was always the first step his parents had drilled into him for any disaster scenario. And then, when everyone was together, they would make their way to the homestead. He stared at a nearby jack-o'-lantern, in which a candle lazily burned. The pumpkin's face seemed even more eerily demonic than it had earlier. "My gran lives up in the hills 20 miles out of town," Chelsea said. "That should be a safe place, right?" Kevin nodded. "Yeah, it'd be a lot safer than sticking around here. People are gonna start doing some crazy stuff before long, I bet." "I'll tell my parents," Chelsea said. "We go on long bike rides every Sunday, so we're all used to cycling long distances. Geez, I still can't believe this is actually happening and that it's real." "My phone, my games," Bernard murmured, looking as if he were about to collapse. Before any of them could say anything else, one of the faculty, a young English teacher chaperoning the party, walked up to them. "Hey guys," he said. It looks like we've had some sort of major power outage or something. We can't get a hold of the power company. Or anyone, really. Even the landlines inside the school are down, so we're just asking everyone to gather and wait at the gates for your parents to show up, okay? I know it sucks to have to shut down this party after all the effort that went into planning it, but there's nothing we can do right now." "Come on, guys," Chelsea said with a sigh, sounding both dejected and worried. "Let's go wait outside." "I'd better go find Kathleen," Gina said. "My parents are across the country in California for the next few days, and I'm staying with her. I'll see you around, guys. Good luck." She turned around and walked off into the shadows, and a massive wave of disappointment and regret crashed against Kevin as she left. This was supposed to have been the night he impressed her and won her heart. But now that chance was gone, and would likely never arise again. Indeed, he had no idea if he would ever see her again. He, Chelsea, and Bernard trudged over to the gates in silence, joining the buzzing stream of kids who were leaving the school. At least here, the jack-o'-lanterns provided some light, but the city beyond the campus was an ominous sea of inky darkness. When they got to the gate, Bernard said his farewells to Chelsea and Kevin. His father lived within walking distance of the school, and he intended to walk to his father's house. Kevin waited with Chelsea for a few minutes before her older sister came by on a tandem bicycle to pick her up. Kevin then waited alone on the edge of the crowd. Not for his mother to come. He knew she and Alan would head straight to the apartment instead of coming here. But for a chance to see Gina one last time. He spent a few minutes wandering around and scanning the faces of the crowd in the gloom, but didn't manage to catch a glimpse of her. Finally, he gave up and left the school grounds, heading in the direction of the family's apartment, a few miles away. Just as he turned the first corner, though, a large, dark figure stepped out from behind one of the large old trees that lined the sidewalk. Kevin made as if to veer around the man, but the guy stepped swiftly in front of him, blocking his way. In the moonlight, he could see the man had Hispanic or Puerto Rican features and had a rough, dangerous look about him. Immediately, fear began to trickle coldly through his veins. "Kevin Cooper," the man growled. "You're coming with me, man." Kevin was shocked that the man knew his name. He was sure that he'd never laid eyes on him before. "Who are you?" he demanded. "How do you know my name?" "My boss sent me to fetch you, hombre." the man growled. "He and your mom go back a long way." He chuckled darkly. "What? Look, I don't know you or your boss, and I'm not going anywhere with you." The man lifted his jacket, revealing a chrome-plated .45 pistol tucked into his belt. "Did I say you got a choice, you little bitch?" he snarled. "This way, punk. Fucking move it, now." Chapter 6. "I think we should go past your brother's school and check if he's there," Jane said, as they walked along the side street. There were a few dead cars on this street, either abandoned in the middle of the road, or with the unsuspecting owners trying to fiddle with the motors under the hoods in the moonlight. It was relatively quiet here for now, though. But the main street was jammed with dead cars and crowds of confused people. There was a fair amount of noise from excited and panicked conversations, along with people yelling and screaming at each other. Jane wanted to keep a low profile and not inadvertently get pulled into any dangerous situation. She knew that this initial period of confusion would soon give way to episodes of violence and looting when people started to understand the full scope of what had happened. She wanted to be far away from the crowds when those sorts of things started happening. "But that'll add like a mile onto our walk," Alan said. "Kevin will know to leave the party and go straight home. We should just go straight back ourselves." What Alan was saying made sense, of course. But the real reason she wanted to swing by the school, which would unfortunately take her right past a crowd and across one of the busiest streets in the city, was to make sure that nothing had happened to Kevin, courtesy of El Diablo or his thugs. She was almost sick with worry, but she still said nothing about El Diablo to Alan. "Alan, I know you're right," she said, keeping up a brisk walking pace and darting her eyes all over the place, scanning every dark, menacing shadow for potential threats. "But Kevin might be hanging around at the party or with his friends. He might think this is just a power outage or something. I'm sorry, sweetie. It'll just put my mind at ease to know that he's done what he's supposed to do and gone straight home. You'll understand when you have kids of your own one day, okay?" Alan rolled his eyes and sighed audibly, wordlessly expressing his disapproval. He did not, however, make any complaints about the current choice of action. He and Jane turned a corner and almost jumped out of their skin with fright as a pack of young people in professional movie-level zombie makeup lunged out of a patch of thick shadows for them, moaning and groaning like bona fide undead. The zombies laughed uproariously and then ran off to pull their prank on some other unsuspecting victims. They obviously thought that what had happened was merely a power loss, and used the darkness to have a riot of fun and pranks. They hadn't realized just how close they'd come to being shot, though. And inside her handbag, Jane slowly eased her finger off the trigger of her pistol. She'd initially felt mad that the young people had scared her and Alan like that. But now she just felt sad for them. They had no idea of what was really going on, and when they did, the shock would hit them like an avalanche of boulders. This Halloween had turned into a real nightmare, one from which there would be no waking up. The city was eerily dark, and the only lights were to be seen from the occasional bonfire burning somewhere, or from old-school jack-o'-lanterns with candles burning inside them. These demon-faced sculptures only added to the surreal and nightmarish feel of the night. The full moon in the clear sky above provided some illumination, and Jane was thankful for this. Just as she was looking up at the big silvery white disk in the sky, someone in the distance howled like a wolf. She had to laugh darkly to herself. It was just some Halloween reveler having fun, but soon enough, some very dangerous packs of predators would be prowling the city, just like wolves looking for loot and easy prey. She hoped that she and her family would be out of town before that started. Thus far, she had not seen any signs of law enforcement, and she wondered not when she would, but rather if she would. She doubted that the police force had any plan of action for a disaster of this magnitude, or if they could even comprehend the vastness of it. She suspected that some military branches would be prepared for an EMP attack, and some high-level members of the government would be too. But she imagined that these plans would involve saving and protecting a small group of important people, and abandoning the general populace to fend for themselves. She shook her head, a sour taste in her mouth, as such thoughts rolled around her head. "What's wrong, Mom?" Alan asked. "Nothing, sweetie," she said, not wishing to burden her son with these dark musings. "Come on, let's pick up the pace." A moment after she said it, a rustle of automatic gunfire echoed through the city streets, followed by the cracks and pops of what sounded like rifles and pistols firing in the distance. She and Alan exchanged a worried look in the moonlight, and although neither of them said anything, a similar thought was floating around each of their minds. It had begun. Alan didn't need to be encouraged any further to move faster, and he quickened his pace. They turned onto another sidewalk, and on this one was a popular live music bar that had always had a big Halloween party every year. Like all the other streets, there were abandoned cars blocking the road, but there was more light. The entire outside area of the bar was filled with dozens of giant jack-o'-lanterns, in which bright candles burned. Crowds of people, all dressed to the nines in their best Halloween outfits for the bar's famous best-dressed contest, were drinking and laughing in throngs outside the bar, paying the waiter and waitresses, who also wore ghoulish outfits, in cash. Jane shook her head. These people obviously thought that this was nothing more than a large power outage, and even the fact that their cell phones weren't working hadn't yet clued them in to the fact that something bigger was going on. The true nature of the situation would hit them soon enough, of course, and she felt sorry for how they would feel when it did. It was as she and Alan passed the bar that they witnessed an act of predation. As the two of them walked past the bar, having crossed the street to avoid the revelers, 3 men across the street came striding toward the bar. They wore simple ghost costumes, just basic sheets with eye holes cut in them, and from the way they were walking, Jane could tell right away that they were up to no good. The ghosts walked up to one of the small groups of people on the edge of the crowd and lifted their sheets to reveal guns in their hands. They quickly relieved the revelers of their cash and valuables before moving on to rob another group of drunk partygoers. "Come on, Alan, let's get out of here before someone decides to stand up to them," she said, breaking into a jog and shooting worried glances over her shoulder as the ghosts subtly continued to rob people at the bar. As she and Alan ducked down the alley that would take them to the main street they would have to cross, they heard shouts coming from the direction of the pub, followed by 3 gunshots, and then a bunch of terrified screams. As chaos broke out behind them, Jane and Alan broke into a run, sprinting down the dark alley. However, just before they got to the end of the alley, a dark figure jumped out from the shadows, blocking their path. Jane skidded to a halt, staring in horror at the silhouette of what looked like a living, breathing werewolf, and Alan let out a little yelp of fright. When the man in the werewolf costume spoke, though, Jane's fear amplified. Now she realized she was dealing with a real monster and would have to use her gun, if she had time to do so. She slid her finger onto the trigger and prepared to whip the weapon out of her bag, all too aware that how she reacted in the next few seconds could make the difference between life and death. She had to act, or she and Alan would surely die. Chapter 7. Paul and Lance reached the homestead in record time. "I haven't run 2 miles that fast since our army days," Paul joked. "And in the dark, too. Although we did have some help from that flare, I guess." Despite being in his mid-40s, like Lance, he was extremely fit from doing plenty of physical labor on the homestead, and neither of the men were exhausted or badly winded from running. "Grab some guns and ammo," Lance said, breathing hard from the run, a thin film of perspiration across his lined forehead, the expression on his face grim. "I have a feeling we're gonna need 'em. I'm gonna get the Land Rover up and running. Meet me out front in 5 minutes, and, maybe grab a few bulletproof vests, too." "Roger that, buddy," Paul said, before racing off toward the bunker where he and Lance kept most of the homestead's weapons and ammunition. Lance, meanwhile, ran over to the barn where he kept his vehicles. He had a number of vintage dirt bikes, all of which he knew would have survived the EMP attack, as well as a late 70s Land Rover Defender, which he had prepared for just such an eventuality. Not only was the Land Rover resistant to an EMP attack, but the windows and windshield were also bulletproof. The doors had reinforced steel panels, and the front had a steel grille mounted on it in case they needed to ram anything out of the way. He had also modified the engine for more low-down pulling strength and powerful acceleration. He tossed a few supplies into the Defender, items he thought he might need: rehydration packs, some lengths of rope, flares, gas lamps, 2 large first aid kits, a large axe as well as a small hatchet, and a few other things, and then hopped into the vehicle and started it up. As Lance had predicted, the Land Rover had been entirely unaffected by the EMP, and the motor roared to life the instant he turned the key in the ignition. He sped out of the barn and skidded to a halt in front of Paul's cabin. Paul came running out with a duffel bag full of guns and ammunition slung over his shoulder, cradling a pile of bulletproof vests in his arms. He tossed these items into the back of the Defender and then climbed into the passenger seat. The moment he slammed the door shut, Lance threw the vehicle into first and floored the accelerator. They hurtled down the winding, bumpy dirt track at speed, with Lance, who knew every bump and pebble in the road and could pretty much navigate the entire 10-mile stretch of rough dirt road with his eyes closed, cycling through the gears, braking hard, and stomping on the gas like an experienced racer. "I'm used to things being pitch black out here at night," Paul remarked. "But when we get to civilization, it's going to be really weird seeing everything blacked out." "I'm not worried about the light or the lack of," Lance said, as he skidded through a sharp curve in the track, so fast that he almost got the Defender up on 2 wheels. "I'm worried about the people. What we think of as civilization is a thin and fragile veneer that can be ripped away and torn to shreds with the slightest of hiccups. But you already know that, don't you? I remember Iraq. I remember it well," Paul muttered darkly. As former soldiers who had experienced some brutal fighting in the Middle East, both men knew just how flimsy a mask civilization really was, and how quickly people could descend into violent savagery. Unbeknownst to the two of them, though, there was another foe lurking large just beyond the horizon. Neither of the men had yet heard the updated reports about the late-season tropical storm blowing in. They got to the tarred road in record time, and once Lance was on the blacktop, he started pushing the Defender to its limits. "Hey, buddy, just watch out for deer and stuff," Paul said nervously from the passenger seat, as he watched the speedometer needle climb past 100 miles an hour. It wasn't long before they came upon the first dead car. Lance hurtled through a sharp, almost blind bend in the road and had to slam on the brakes, causing the big Land Rover to fishtail all over the place, its tires howling and screeching in protest, to avoid slamming into an abandoned truck in the middle of the road. "I know you're eager to get to your family, man," Paul said. His fingers dug into the seat with a white-knuckled grip. "But you aren't going to do a very good job of rescuing them if we kill ourselves in a car wreck on the way there. The road ahead is going to be littered with more and more of these abandoned vehicles. You can't go speeding like a maniac through them." All right, Lance said, his heart beating rapidly. The near miss had scared some sense into him, and as desperately as he wanted to get to his family, he knew Paul was right. He slowed down to a safer pace, although he continued to travel well above the national speed limit. They drove for an hour on the quiet country road, and as they got closer to the city and the coast, the land flattened out, and the hills started to get smaller. There were also far more dead cars littering the roads, and Lance had to slow down drastically. He tried to stay calm and prevent his frustration from bubbling up into cursing and anger, but it was difficult, because he knew that every minute wasted by having to reduce his speed and carefully maneuver around dead cars was another minute of increased danger for his family. Eventually, they passed through one of the small towns, and this was where the full scale of the disaster really hit them. The entire city was shrouded in thick darkness, except for a few eerie jack-o'-lanterns. Abandoned vehicles clogged the streets, but no people could be seen, which only added to the strange, surreal atmosphere. "Man, I'm half expecting a bunch of real-life zombies to stagger out of one of these side streets," Paul muttered. "I feel like we've slipped out of reality into an episode of the freaking Walking Dead or something. A lot of people we're going to run into are going to be a lot more dangerous than any zombie could be," Lance muttered, as he drove up onto the sidewalk and smashed through a pile of garbage cans to get around a pile-up of dead cars. "Zombies don't have guns." "Right now, I don't see any zombies or people," Paul said. "I wonder where the hell everyone is. I know things have just gotten pretty crazy, but man, where's everyone gone?" "Don't worry, we'll see enough people when we get to the city," Lance said. "I'd prefer if it looked like this, I'll tell you that now. I'd much rather be going through a ghost town than a city full of confused, frightened people." They got through the town without seeing a single person, and then sped up as the road became less cluttered with abandoned vehicles. They drove uphill for a while, and then when they got over the top of the rise, they were able to look down on the city, which was now a mere few miles away. "Damn," Paul murmured, letting out a low whistle of surprise at the sight that greeted his eyes. "I don't think the coast here has looked like this for hundreds of years," Lance remarked. Both men had seen the view from this point hundreds, even thousands of times before, but never had they seen it like this. The city and the suburbs surrounding it were usually a vast sea of light sprawled out across the length below them. But now the formerly gigantic ocean of luminescence had been reduced to a few scattered lights. Bonfires burned in several spots, and it seemed that a number of areas of the city were on fire. But most places were dark. Thousands of tiny glowing orange dots scattered throughout the city and the suburbs were probably jack-o'-lanterns, Lance presumed. Then, however, the men saw a far more ominous sight. Brief, bright flashes in the dark. Muzzle flares. They were too far away to hear the gunshots, but they could see them plain enough. "It started," Lance said grimly. "How deep in are we going to take the defender?" Paul asked. "I can't see too clearly from here, but from what I can make out, it looks like cars clog all the main roads into the city. I know this vehicle can go places where most others can't, but even so, it's no airplane. And it ain't no tank that can just drive over cars, neither." "I know," Lance said. "I'll drive to the northern suburbs. Truman Park is huge, and there are plenty of places there to hide the defender. We'll drive into the park, find a place to hide it, and go on foot from there." "I guess that's all we can do," Paul said. "Before I set off, you'd best get a gun out and have it ready to shoot," Lance said. "With just about every car on the road dead in the water, a working vehicle is going to attract attention. I'm going to turn off the lights. The moonlight is bright enough to drive by if I go slowly. But even so, the motor's sound will attract attention, probably the kind we don't want. If anyone even so much as looks at us suspiciously, give them a warning shot or two. And if they don't heed the warning—" "I know what to do," Paul said, taking an AR-15 out of the duffel bag in the back. Lance turned off the lights and set off down the road that led to the northern suburbs. And below them, in the dark city, the fires started to spread, and the ominous flashes of muzzle flares grew more numerous and frequent.